Confidence comes with experience. Confidence can come with success. Confidence can come with education. Each person really needs to figure that out. But as HR executives, we need to help them make sure that they get to where they want to go.
Human resources, human capital, people, and culture. This single vocation has many names. HR professionals are responsible for the most critical success factor within any organization. It's people. HR Studio Podcast brings you interviews from HR executives, keynote speakers, and industry trend spotters so you can listen, learn, and leverage. Welcome to HR Studio Podcast, building the next generation of HR leaders. HR Studio is brought to you by A.J. O'Connor Associates. For more than 33 years, AJO has partnered with individuals, teams, and organizations to reach their goals in the areas of executive coaching, team and leadership development, and career transition. AJO is a trusted HR consulting partner to many world-class organizations and is known for uncompromising quality and customized services. For more information, go to ajoconnor.com.
Welcome to HR Studio. My name is Linda Hlavac, and I'll be the moderator for today's podcast episode. We are extremely fortunate to have as our guest today Dr. Tracey Wilen. Some of you may be familiar with her, but let me introduce her to you. Dr. Wilen is a prominent thought leader and speaker on the impact of technology on society, work, and careers. She's a former visiting scholar at Stanford University and has held leadership positions at Apple, at HP, and at Cisco Systems. Dr. Wilen has authored 11 books, including her most recent book called Employed for Life, 21st Century Career Trends. She's also written 2 other books in the last few years, one called Women-Led, Career Perspectives from Workplace Leaders, and Society 3.0, How Technology is Reshaping Education, Work, and Society. Dr. Wilen has appeared on CNN, Fox, CBS News, and in the Wall Street Journal, the Chicago Tribune, Forbes, Los Angeles Times, and USA Today. She frequently contributes to the Huffington Post and LinkedIn, and is a regular guest on radio and TV shows across the U.S. as an expert contributor. So, Tracey, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, Linda, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no, it's our pleasure. The HR Studio is all about building the next generation of HR leaders, right? And so our followers really look forward to learning from your experiences as a leader, as well as from kind of your area of expertise. So I'm going to try to cover both, and I hope that's okay.
Sure. Thank you.
Terrific. So, to get us started, Tracey, would you mind maybe sharing your kind of personal career journey, which clearly has culminated in the level of success that you've achieved?
Well, Linda, I'm sure your listeners don't have enough time to hear all of it, but let me just summarize. There's an old quote: "When doors close, windows open." And this is actually a topic that I talk a lot about for students actually graduating, because to me it summarizes my journey, which has been twists and turns and ups and downs. And I actually think it's a typical journey that many people today are having in their careers, and many young people, I think, should expect. So I look at it as there's an open door, and I try something, and then the door closes. So I turn my new direction for an open window, and then find that direction. The key is here is whenever something looks like a possibility, it's up to me to take that opportunity and run with it. And I think that just summarizes how I've led my life and found different opportunities and lost out on others.
Okay. Makes great sense. I love the kind of the picture you paint for people of windows and doors, and I tend to agree with you. It's such a dynamic work world and workplace today.
Well, Linda, every experience, whether positive or negative, has a use and has a value. So there's no formula, and I think that's important for people listening to understand.
Yeah, agreed. Can you comment about what you kind of always thought might be your career, and has what you've achieved to date, is it reflective at all of what you thought you might accomplish in your life, Tracey?
So I'm actually a very pragmatic person, right? So I look at things probably a little differently. I look at it as we're living longer, right? Many of us will live to 100. You probably know someone living to 100. And as a result of that, we need to actually afford to live longer. And so that reality, which hit me very young, is that I'm going to be working for 50 or 70 years. And so as a result of that, I realized pretty young that it wasn't going to be one single career, but that I was probably going to have multiple careers spanning anywhere from maybe 1 year, 5 years to 20 years. And I actually even speak and talk and blog a lot about that because I think all of us, including myself, need to keep taking what I call a career selfie, which is a snapshot of any time in my career, an assessment of, do I need to refocus my change my path, move in a new direction? And so to answer your question, yes and no many times over. Is it what I thought it would be? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. But at each step of the way, I just felt like you need to assess, change direction, and take steps.
Mm-hmm. I love the concept of the career selfie. Do you do that, Tracey, every, 2 years, every 3 years? I'm just curious as to your own kind of rhythm there.
Oh, actually, for my personal rhythm is every year on an annual basis, I have a sit down with myself. And I go through what I want to accomplish that year. And then I check in with myself every quarter to see where I'm at. When I have a major career selfie, I think the last one was in 2013, when I had to make a decision if I was going to stay in the corporate world or actually move into my own. And that took a lot of planning and assessment and really thinking through what that was going to look like. So yes, I do take selfies all the time.
That's excellent. You sound like an extremely intentional person. The concept of intentionality sound like you live that in and out. So that's terrific. Hey, as you look back on your path or your journey, do any kind of lessons jump to mind that our followers might benefit from, in addition to everything else you've already shared? Sometimes there are the roadblocks and things, you find a way to get around them, over them, or through them. Is there any lessons like that you could share with our listeners?
Yeah, I think the biggest lesson I had was my first layoff. I'm going to emphasize my first layoff. I was in my early 20s. And at that point, I realized that I needed to really own my career and not rely on a firm, a person, or an organization to manage it for me. Because when you're unemployed and you have expenses, you pretty quickly learn how to monetize yourself as a product or a service to generate income. And you also learn that layoffs are a reality in today's world. And it's really not your event, it's an economic event. And usually you can make these layoffs or transitions lead to bigger and better opportunities. So I'm almost glad that it happened at such a young age, because it mentally prepared me to take ownership of my career. And I think people today really need to take ownership of their careers so that they can stay employed for the long haul.
Mm-hmm. Wow, great. So you clearly turned what could have been a rough time, although I'm sure it wasn't easy, but into a positive, right? And it has stuck with you.
Yeah, I think it's just a reality. I mean, I think a lot of people in the past could go and work in one firm for a very long time and not worry about those things. But in today's climate and competitive environment, you're going to have transitions, you're going to have layoffs, and you're going to have opportunities that you never expected or would have in the past. So I think we all just have to really tune into that things are different today.
Yeah, excellent point. Did any of this lead to, you defining or landing on what your passion is, Tracey? A lot of times it's through, the journey, the twists and turns that really illuminate for us what it is we want to do. If you could use a word or so to describe your passion, what would that be?
Well, so to use a very dated 90s term, a not. I don't have a passion. And in fact, as a very pragmatic person, it's a daunting thought. So what I advise people is to get as much exposure as you can to a variety of work experience so that you can figure out something that you like to do, that you do well, but well enough to get paid for that. And I think that interests can change over time and evolve into new things over and over again. So I don't personally, I was not one of these people who grew up and had a passion for all my life, although I know people who do. I've just viewed it as, what do I like to do now that I can do really well, but well enough to get paid for it and stay interested in it until I find something else.
Yeah, I see. Wow, great. I understand completely. As a resource or set of experiences or reference guides or books, is there anything that you'd recommend for our followers that they could pick up in their time and perhaps begin to refine a little bit their own leadership style or skills and how to become a better leader?
Well, I've gotten a lot of positive feedback on the book that I wrote with my team, Women Lead, Career Perspectives from Workforce Leaders. And it's because we've surveyed and interviewed thousands of women and men across 3 generations from various industries and fields on their career and leadership advice. And what we heard from readers is that there was something for everyone in all phases of their careers and their lives. And they realized that no 2 careers in life are exactly the same. And so, I continue to point people to that because it's not my story. It's the story of thousands of women and men who have achieved success in leadership.
Okay, great. Very good. Thank you for that recommendation. I guess if we pivot a little bit off now your personal journey, I appreciate your candor there, and talk a little bit now about your domain or your area of expertise. How, Tracey, did you become interested in studying the impact of technology, right, on society, on the workplace, on gender and such? How did that come to you?
So, I started my career, I'm actually from New York originally, and after a lot of job hunting and interview, my first job was at a magazine called Vogue. And I'll tell you, it was so hard to get that job, and when I got it, I just thought I died and went to heaven.
No doubt.
And everybody was wearing Prada. And then I had to move, unfortunately, but fortunately for family reasons, to Northern California. And I thought, well, there'd be no problem for me to get a job because I had a liberal arts college education, a great background in media, in sales, and I actually couldn't get a job because that part of the world is incredibly technical, and they required and wanted people with advanced degrees and technology degrees. And I realized at that point that there was this new reality for me, and it was really the future, not just for me in Northern California, but probably across the world. And the future of how society work and careers would be influenced heavily by technology. And that I started to want to really look at that more closely.
Wow. It's a great story again, right? Faced with something and turning it into a reality and a positive. So, having embraced this area now for years and done so much research on it, can you share with our listeners today some of the both maybe macro and or micro trends across society or across the workplace that you see that are going to demand proactive HR attention?
Sure. So I think the first one I mentioned, which is extreme longevity, the fact that people are living to 100, and they have to really start to realize that their careers will outlive many companies. And I think for HR executives, you have to be cognizant of that. On some of the micro trends, there's many, but a couple that come to mind is the loyal worker is replaced by an entrepreneurial employee. The world is so much more competitive today, and businesses need to evolve, and we need to really hire people who can almost be their CEO of their own jobs and evolve a firm. I mean, I remember when I hired my employees, I would sit them down and say, you see this job that I'm hiring you for today? This job isn't going to look anything like this job today a year from now. And the reason is because of you. Because you are the expert that I'm hiring, and you're going to move this job and our firm ahead. And so HR executives, we really need to create these paths so that managers can groom and employees can become much more entrepreneurial. So that's the first one. The second one, and I'll give you just three. The second one is longevity at a firm does not mean promotion. And today what counts more is contribution. So I see employees and new employees of all ages actually rapidly advancing in firms because they're contributing. They're not waiting for someone to tell them what to do. These are the employees who actually understand how to ask for the opportunity. And I think HR executives need to see this transition, but also facilitate, again, the ability for managers and employees to grow without the traditional obstacles. Right? So I think that's very important for HR. The third one is that the corporate culture is increasingly becoming a significant glue, right? As we're increasingly in a remote world, we need to make sure that employees fully understand and engage in the corporate culture, right? So that when you're engaging with an employee who works for a firm in India, your experience is exactly the same as the employee in New Jersey, right? And the HR executives need to understand that the culture is what really pulls, right, this together so that customers have a very consistent interface. So there's many micro trends, but those are the three that just come to mind when you mention it.
Yeah. No, those are great. Interestingly, right, I think good HR, strong HR leaders and professionals will be able to kind of extract from your comments what the implications are for the workplace in which they work. And that ability is probably somewhat unique and perhaps different across HR folks. What traits or skills, Tracey, can you think about as you kind of synthesize what the workplace is going to demand and who needs to deliver it, which is usually the HR team? What kind of skills or traits will be required for success as an HR professional in the future?
Well, in the research that we did for Women Lead, we looked at the 10 key modern day leadership characteristics, skills, and attributes for leaders. And some that bubble up to the top consistently with communication skills. It's still, required. Complex problem solving, the ability to lead teams. But here's the interesting thing that we found is that the women, when we surveyed women and asked them to rank both men and women, women actually ranked women highest on all 10 leadership skills, characteristics, and attributes. And that was interesting because the men that we surveyed actually did not rank men highest on all 10 skills, characteristics, and attributes. So that indicated to us that the workforce is very ready for women leaders. And as we dug into the data even deeper, we found that actually young men, this is our, Gen X and Gen Y men, actually didn't even see gender or have gender preferences. In fact, our younger generation overall don't really care if leaders today are men or women. They just want to see really good leaders. Where we found some of the differences was actually in our boomer men, age 54 and up. And what this means for HR is that we have to make sure in this ever-evolving world that we don't replicate past practices of unconscious bias or things that are not conducive to helping all employees, regardless of age or gender, be able to grow and lead. So I think that was, we didn't expect that finding, but it was something that I felt that all HR leaders could really learn from and remember, because a lot of HR executives still work in very hierarchical firms. And if we keep emulating these past beliefs, we'll never let our young people grow. And I think that's really important.
Yeah, well, that's an excellent point. Do you see any specific, backgrounds or areas of study or educational levels that HR leaders of the future should accomplish in order to develop these skills? Because you're right, to get away from tradition, right, is going to lead HR folks to be more effective in the future. That's kind of sense I'm taking away from your comments. Do you have any thoughts on what the best training might be for HR professionals of the future?
So HR, the HR executives that I see who are very successful are the ones who have put themselves through their own job rotations. And that's a lot like my own career. I, put myself through job rotations, which means you identify lateral moves in the firm so that you can get the experience and knowledge and exposure to different experiences in HR. Also, being ready to leave a firm so that you can get more experience in multiple industries and verticals. And I think that practice is just not only for HR executives, I think for all of us. And I know a lot of us grow up with the mindset that we have to stay in one firm forever and stay in one role. And that's just it just isn't how it works anymore. You really have to, say, okay, I'm in HR, I need to learn compensation, I need to learn benefits, I need to learn, whatever next area of HR that's important to me. And I have to orchestrate my own lateral moves and transitions because someone may not be watching me close enough to be able to facilitate that for me. So I'll have to do that myself.
Yeah. You sound like you would be a big proponent then, Tracey, of people obviously owning their careers, but literally asking for what it is they want to achieve in their career and along their pathway. Can you comment a little bit about that? Because oftentimes, too, you hear men and women feel very different and have different levels of confidence when it comes to acting and asking and taking charge of things.
Yeah, well, I do believe that succession planning starts at day one. And I think that's also very important for HR executives to realize. In the old days, we would wait, right? We wouldn't start leadership training until people were in their 30s or 40s. Well, nobody wants that anymore. Everybody wants to be a leader on day one, and we should set the expectation that they can be a leader on day one, and that they have to participate in their own pathing for themselves with our support, HR executive support. So that could be by, creating 100-day plans for yourself, timelines for yourself, regularly setting goals, and I just think the individual really needs to do that. Confidence comes with experience. Confidence can come with success. Confidence can come with education. Each person really needs to figure that out. But as HR executives, we need to help them make sure that they get to where they want to go.
Yeah. I have to say, you seem like someone who has such an excellent perspective on the changes that occurred in your own journey. Some people, when they have bad news or a career turn that they didn't ask for, they lose that perspective and that confidence versus bounce back. Can you comment on that, Tracey? Because you certainly have taken charge and have experience there, and I'm sure our listeners would benefit from your experiences there.
Yeah, well, I think a lot of it is just, a lot of it can just be where you come from. I mean, I didn't come from an extravagant background, right? So, becoming a revenue stream was, crucial for me to pay rent, to do things in life. I was very aware, I think, of people who had things and people who didn't. And unfortunately, we were on the other side of that. And so, I just felt like and feel like, nobody else can know you as well as you know yourself. And we're all dealt, a deck of, a hand, like cards. And it's up to us to play our aces and know where our jokers are, and be able to, play a really good hand for ourselves at any time. And yes, do I get down? Absolutely. But you know what? It's a waste of time to dwell. Have I become unconfident? Absolutely. But, it's not productive. So I think we just have to look at ourselves as, what do I want my life to look like? I want to have a great life. And how am I going to get there? Because I ultimately have to take responsibility for that.
Yeah, it's great. Thank you for that candor. It's really, really a lot of what you said, I think, lands with people because in our private selves, you come across one way, but you are another. So to balance those out and take charge is the skill. So thank you for that. Tracey, you are someone that others admire, right? And others aim to emulate. Is there someone that you admire and or shoot to emulate and would and do follow regularly, perhaps, and why?
And that's an interesting question. I'll answer that in two ways. For me personally, I don't really follow any individual. I like the news. I like to keep up on technology. I like interesting shows like Shark Tank. I like learning about new startups and new advancements in technology. So I just kind of follow that. But I'll go back to the women lead research because I have a surprising result. Every time I've done a lot of studies on women over the years, and I would always ask the question, what impact has your mother made in your life or on your career? And back when I started my research in the 90s, a lot of women said none. It was like a father or a brother or a male at work. And in this research study, which is in 2013 or so, it was the word mother came up over 200 times, or actually 700 times in 200 interviews, which is like 3 times, plus an interview, which signified to me that mothers had shifted into significant role models, not only for their daughters, but also for their sons. And then that made me reflect on my background, which is I had very strong grandmothers, very strong mother. And so, if I were to observe and reflect on myself, I'd say I'm a product of the strong women in my family, although very different, obviously, because of generations. So, there isn't really a single person, but I think we're byproducts of people who have subtly, influenced us and be observed over our lives.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's great. You're reminding me I probably need to thank my own mom at some point. We probably all could do that more than we do. So thank you for that candor. Tracey, where might we see you next? You are a global speaker. You do addresses to groups all around the world. Where will we see you next?
Well, I'm on a speaking tour, and typically HR executives of companies bring me in to talk to their groups, or some of the larger HR conferences bring me in as a keynote to talk about the future of work skills, leadership, and career. So basically this year I'll be on the East Coast, the West, I'll be in Canada, and the Midwest, talking at a number of these conferences throughout the year, and actually Texas. So I'm pretty excited about it because I think people really embrace a more modern digital message, today, and that's great because that's what I enjoy doing right now.
Yeah, no, that's great. So if our followers wanted to contact you, perhaps to do work with you in the future, what would be your advice to them? What's the best way to do that?
Oh, well, thank you very much. My website, thank you. My website is TraceyWilen.com, which is TraceyWilen. My Twitter is @TraceyWilen. On Facebook, Dr. Tracey Wilen. I'm on LinkedIn. I think you can find me.
Yeah, no, that's great. I appreciate that very much because you clearly have quite a domain expertise, which is incredibly relevant to our followers on this call today, both today and in the future. So I appreciate you sharing how to get a hold of you and perhaps ways to connect to do work together in the future. Tracey, as we close, as you know, we have a community here, and I'm wondering what question would you leave for our followers for them to respond to on our LinkedIn community as we get dialogues going and built? What question would you leave for them?
I would ask them, what is your career selfie for this year?
It's an excellent question. Thank you, Tracey, for that. And let me thank you again for your time today. I, could talk to you, I'm sure, much longer, but you have provided great relevance, great research, headlines, and materials for our followers. I appreciate your time very, very much, and we look forward to talking through our community with response to your question there. So thank you so much.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you for listening to HR Studio Podcast, Building the Next Generation of HR Leaders. To discover additional information from this week's episode and to join the conversation, please visit our LinkedIn group and connect with a growing community of current and future HR leaders. You can also catch all episodes in this series by visiting hrstudiopodcast.com. HR Studio has been brought to you by A.J. O'Connor Associates, a partner to individuals, teams, and organizations to reach their executive coaching, team and leadership development, and career transition goals. Please visit ajoconnor.com for more information. That's AJOCONNOR.com. nnor.com.